My sister Nia looked radiant in her white gown, a vision of lace, pearls, and 23-year-old optimism. I watched from my assigned seat at table 12, the family overflow section, tucked near the kitchen doors where the catering staff rushed past with trays of champagne I couldn't afford. The Grand Marquis Ballroom in downtown Chicago was everything a wedding venue should be. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city lights. It was the kind of place that whispered old money and new beginnings. I had left Surrey with my best friend Keisha 3 hours ago, my 5-year-old daughter's disappointed face still fresh in my mind. She had wanted to come, to wear the gold dress we'd found at the thrift store, to see Auntie Nia get married. But Keisha had convinced me otherwise. Formal weddings and kindergartners didn't mix well, especially when the family scrutiny was already suffocating. It was better to keep Zuri home where she could watch her favorite cartoons and avoid the whispers that would inevitably fall on me. The scrutiny had started the moment I walked through the doors at 7:30. Alone, 28 years old, a single mother, wearing a dress I'd bought 2 years ago that still looked decent if you didn't examine the hem too closely. My cousin Tanya had swept past me in the receiving line, her designer maternity gown showing off a 7-month pregnancy that she wore like a crown. Her husband, my ex-husband, had given me a nod so brief it barely qualified as an acknowledgement. Kevin, the man who had walked out when the pregnancy test came back positive, who had married my wealthy cousin 6 months later, and who now stood across the ballroom looking like he'd never made the biggest mistake of his life. Meanwhile, I worked 12-hour shifts at the hospital, came home to a daughter who asked why she didn't have a daddy, and tried not to calculate how many extra shifts I'd need to cover next month's rent. Amara, my dear, you came alone? My mother's voice carried that particular Nigerian accent that managed to sound concerned and disappointed simultaneously. She appeared at my table during the cocktail hour, my father trailing behind her with the uncomfortable expression he always wore when forced to acknowledge his daughter's perceived failures. We had hoped you might bring someone. There are several eligible men here, from the church. You remember Dr. Okeke's son. I'm fine, Mama. I forced a smile I didn't feel. Zuri sends her love to Nia. Ah, yes. The child, my mother's tone spoke volumes. Keisha is watching her, I assume? Such a shame you cannot afford a real nanny. They moved on before I could respond, circulating among guests who actually mattered. Family, who had made something of themselves. My older brother Tund, and his corporate law degree. Cousins with MBAs and stock portfolios. And then there was me, the pediatric nurse who had dropped out of med school when she got pregnant, living in a 1-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that was optimistically described as up and coming. Dinner had been interminable. 7 courses of food I barely tasted while conversations swirled around me. The couple to my left discussed their vacation home in Lagos. The woman across from me showed off an engagement ring that probably cost more than I made in a year. I smiled and nodded and wondered if anyone would notice if I left early. Then came the dancing. The DJ announced the couple's first dance, and Nia floated across the floor in her new husband's arms. My parents danced next, looking every bit the proud family matriarch and patriarch. Even my younger cousins paired off, laughing and spinning under lights that cast everything in soft focus. Outside the windows, clouds had gathered over Chicago's skyline. The weather forecast had promised clear skies, but nature had other plans. Thunder rumbled in the distance, barely audible over the Afrobeat tracks now playing. Within minutes, rain began streaming down the glass, turning the city lights into abstract streaks of color. May I have this dance? Kevin's voice behind me made every muscle in my body tense. I turned to find him standing there alone, Tanya presumably taking a break or holding court somewhere with her admirers. No, thank you, I kept my voice level. Professional. The same tone I used with difficult parents in the pediatric ward. Come on, Amara. For old time's sake. He was using that charm that had worked on me once upon a time. before I realized charm was all he had to offer. We can be adults about this. We are being adults. I'm declining your invitation. I turned back toward the dance floor, hoping he'd take the hint and leave. He didn't. It doesn't have to be like this between us. I know I made mistakes, but Kevin, I stood, suddenly exhausted by the charade. Go back to your pregnant wife. Dance with her. Leave me alone. My pregnant wife, who is carrying my legitimate child, he said, the cruelty lurking beneath his charm finally surfacing. Unlike the mistake that cost you your medical degree, I should have slapped him, should have caused a scene, should have done anything other than stand there while he walked away, rejoining Tanya, who had appeared at the edge of the dance floor. She looked at me across the room, one hand on her rounded belly, and smiled a victor's smile. The music shifted to something slower, a ballad. Couples filled the floor, swaying together while the storm outside matched the one building in my chest. I sank back into my chair at table 12 and tried very hard not to cry in front of 200 people who already pitied me. That's when I noticed him. He stood near the bar, apart from the crowd, but somehow commanding attention anyway. Tall, with sleek, dark hair and a posture that suggested military discipline or martial arts training. He was East Asian, likely Korean, dressed in a black suit so perfectly tailored it made every other man in the room look disheveled. But it was his face that held my attention. Sharp, angular features, high cheekbones, and eyes that seemed to see straight through every defense I'd spent years constructing. He was watching me, not subtly, not with the passing curiosity of a stranger at a wedding. He was studying me with an intensity that should have made me uncomfortable, but instead sent a completely different kind of shiver down my spine. I looked away first, heat rising in my cheeks against my dark skin. When I glanced back, he was speaking with someone from the groom's family. They exchanged a few words, and then the stranger began moving through the crowd. Toward me. My first instinct was to run, to grab my clutch, and make some excuse about checking on Zuri. But something kept me frozen in my seat while he crossed the ballroom with the confidence of someone who had never been told no in his entire life. He stopped at my table. Up close, he was devastating. You've been sitting alone all evening, he said. His voice was deep, American, but with a cadence that hinted at a second language. That seems like a waste. I'm fine, I managed, though my pulse had picked up speed. Thank you for your concern. I don't think you are fine. He pulled out the chair beside me without asking permission and sat down. The movement was fluid, practiced. I think you are miserable and trying very hard not to show it. The observation was so accurate it stole my breath. You don't know anything about me. I know you came alone to a wedding where everyone else is paired off. I know that man who approached you earlier said something that made you want to disappear. I know you've been checking your phone every 15 minutes, probably thinking about leaving, his lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Am I wrong? That's very observant of you. I set my phone down. Are you a friend of the bride or groom? Neither. Business associate of the groom's uncle, he gestured vaguely. They invited me. Minyon Pak. He extended his hand. I took it, and his palm was warm against mine, his grip confident without being aggressive. Amara Adebayo. Amara, he said my name carefully, respecting the weight of it. The bride's sister. The one who came alone. Word travels fast. In certain circles, everything travels fast. He released my hand, but didn't move away. I have a proposition for you, Amara. This should have been where I made my excuses and left. Where I remembered I was a single mother with responsibilities. Instead, I heard myself say, "What kind of proposition?" Minjun leaned closer, his voice dropping low enough that only I could hear over the music. Dance with me. Pretend to be my wife for the rest of the evening. Let everyone here see that you are not alone, not pitted, not forgotten. I stared at him. You want me to pretend to be married to you? To a complete stranger? Why not? It solves both our problems. His expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his dark eyes. My family in Seoul is relentless about wanting me to settle down. Your family clearly enjoys reminding you that you are single. We could help each other. That's insane. Perhaps he stood, offering his hand again. But the next song is starting. And your ex-husband is watching us from across the room with a very interesting expression on his face. So what do you say, Amara? Will you dance with me and let everyone think you belong to someone who actually appreciates you? The smart answer was no. The responsible answer was no. I took his hand and stood. One dance. That's all. His smile was subtle but devastating. We'll see about that. Minjun led me onto the dance floor with the confidence of someone who owned the room. His hand settled at the small of my back, warm through the fabric of my dress, while his other hand clasped mine. For a man who looked like he could break things without effort, his touch was remarkably controlled. You dance well, I said as we began moving to the music. My mother insisted on ballroom lessons, he replied. She believed a man of status should know how to lead. She sounds strict. She was. She passed away 3 years ago. I'm sorry. She would have liked you, Minjun said, his dark eyes meeting mine. She respected strong women. Women who could stand on their own feet. Is that what you think I'm doing? Choosing you, I asked, a slight edge to my voice. We just met. This is pretend. For now, his hand pressed slightly firmer against my back, guiding me through a turn. But pretend has a way of becoming real when two people are honest about what they want. I should have pulled away. Instead, I found myself moving closer. The song shifted. Around us, couples continued swaying. I caught glimpses of familiar faces watching us. My mother's eyebrows had climbed toward her hairline. Tanya looked confused. And Kevin was staring from his position near the bar with an expression of pure jealousy. Your ex-husband is very interested in our dance, Minjun observed quietly. How do you know he's my ex? The way he looked at you, like he owned something he'd thrown away and suddenly wanted back now that someone else was picking it up, Minjun's jaw tightened. Men like that are predictable. You don't know anything about him. I know he abandoned you when you needed him most. I know he married your cousin. And I know he is not worth the tears you have been holding back all evening. I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. You're very presumptuous. I prefer observant. The song ended. Applause rippled through the ballroom. Minjun released me slowly, then offered his arm. Shall we return to your table? I believe your family will have questions. They did. The moment we sat down, my cousin Obi descended on us. Amara, you didn't mention you were bringing someone. Obi's smile was predatory. Aren't you going to introduce us? This is Minjun Park, I said, trying to sound casual. Minjun, this is my cousin Obi. A pleasure. Minjun's smile was polite but cold. Are you from Chicago, Mr. Park? I am now. My family is originally from Seoul, but business brought me here. He draped his arm across the back of my chair, a gesture possessive and protective. Amara and I have been seeing each other for a few months. Quietly. The lie rolled off his tongue seamlessly. Obi looked between us, trying to reconcile this. A few months? Amara, you never said anything. I prefer privacy, I said, reaching for my water glass. Especially after everything with Kevin. Obi nodded. Of course. But he looks wealthy. What do you do, Mr. Park? Import and export. And I own several restaurants in the city. Seoul Prime mostly. Obi's eyes widened. Seoul Prime was the most exclusive Korean steakhouse in the city. That's impressive. More family members approached throughout the evening. Minjun handled each interrogation with effortless charm, weaving details into our fake relationship that sounded entirely believable. When my aunt asked about Zuri, he knew her name and age without hesitation, mentioning her love of drawing. You're very good at this, I murmured when we finally had a moment alone. It is a necessary skill in my world, he replied. What world is that, exactly? You said business, but would you prefer if I said I was something more dangerous? His thumb traced circles on my palm. Would that make this more exciting for you? This isn't about excitement. This is about getting through one evening without being the family charity case. You are not a charity case, Amara. You are a queen without a kingdom. The intensity in his gaze made my skin flush. Before I could respond, a presence loomed over our table. I looked up to find Kevin standing there, Tanya notably absent. Can we talk? Kevin ignored Minjun. Outside. I don't think. It's fine, Minjun stood. I need to speak with the host anyway. Take your time, he walked away, leaving me alone with Kevin. Kevin sat in Minjun's vacated chair. Who is that guy? And don't give me the restaurant story. Why not? It's the truth. Because nobody's heard of him in your circle. You tell Keisha everything, and Keisha talks. Kevin leaned closer. I think you hired him. I didn't hire him. And frankly, Kevin, who I see is none of your business. It is when you're looking desperate. That guy? He's dangerous. I can tell. He's polite, which is more than I can say for you. Don't act like you're better than us. You're the one showing up with a stranger, pretending you've moved on. Maybe I've moved on. Happy. Kevin laughed, harsh and bitter. Amara, look at your life. You're a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. That guy in the expensive suit? He's not going to stick around when he realizes what a mess your life is. The words hit their target. But before I could respond, Minjun reappeared at my side. Is there a problem? His voice was silk over steel. No problem, Kevin stood. Just catching up with my ex-wife. Then you are finished catching up, Minjun's hand settled at my waist. The storm is getting worse. I am going to drive Amara home. Unless you have any objection? It wasn't really a question. Kevin looked between us, recognized he was outmatched, and walked away. I can call an Uber, I said. The rain is heavy. Let me drive you. The SUV waiting outside was sleek and black, a driver already behind the wheel. Minjun opened the back door for me. Thank you, I said as we drove through the rain-soaked streets. For tonight. It was mutually beneficial. Minjun turned to face me. But I meant what I said about continuing this arrangement for a few weeks. That's insane. You said that before. And yet you agreed to dance with me. His hand found mine. Think about it. You need breathing room. I need the same. I have a 5-year-old daughter. She can't know about this. Agreed. This stays between adults. The car pulled up to my building. Minjun walked me to the door. Think about it, Amara. He handed me a business card. I went upstairs, tucked the card into my purse, and told myself I would never call him. Monday morning arrived with the sharp buzz of my alarm. I dragged myself out of bed, got Zuri ready for kindergarten, and headed to the hospital. My phone started buzzing before I'd even finished morning rounds. Text after text from family members asking about Minjun. Even my mother had sent a message. We need to talk about Saturday night. I was updating a patient chart when Kevin appeared in the hallway. We need to talk, he said. Now. I'm working. You're not supposed to be up here. I told them I was visiting my daughter. She's not a patient here. Who is Minjun Park? Kevin demanded. I've been asking around. People say he's connected to the K-Town syndicates. The Mafia, Amara. You're watching too many movies. Is he paying you? Get out, Kevin. If he's giving you money, you're putting Zuri in danger. Security, I called out. Kevin left before security arrived, but the accusation hung in the air. That evening, Keisha came over for dinner. So, she said, eating Chinese takeout. Obi called me. And Tanya. Everyone wants to know about this Korean guy. It was a favor, I said. One night. He sounds intense. He is. At 10:15, there was a knock on my door. Heavy. Insistent. I checked the people. 2 men. Russian. Amara Adebayo, one said. We need to talk about Minjun Park. I didn't open the door. I don't know who you're talking about. We saw the photos. From the wedding. You're his woman. That makes you leverage. Mr. Volkov wants a word. They left after a moment, but the threat was clear. I pulled Minjun's card from my wallet and dialed. Amara. 2 men just came to my apartment. Russians. They mentioned someone named Volkov. Lock your door. I'll be there in 15 minutes. He arrived in 14, accompanied by a massive man introduced as June. The Bratva, Minjun explained, pacing my small living room. They've been pushing into my territory. Someone sent them photos from the wedding.
Who?
We'll find out. But right now, you and Zuri aren't safe here. So what happens? You come with me. I packed bags for Zuri and myself. We drove to Minjun's penthouse in the Gold Coast. It was a fortress of glass and steel, luxurious and safe. The guest rooms are upstairs, Minjun said. Stay as long as you need. The next few days were surreal. I took leave from the hospital.
Minjun ringte et for at tutor for Zuri.
I watched him with my daughter, terrified by how natural it looked. He taught her how to hold chopsticks, how to draw, how to say hello in Korean. He's good with her, Keisha whispered when she visited. I know. On Friday, June came into the study where Minjun and I were talking. We found the leak. It was your cousin, Obi. He sold the information to the Russians to cover gambling debts. Obi. I felt sick. The Russians have him, June added. They're holding him as insurance. We have to get him back, I said, surprising myself. He's family. He betrayed you, Minjun said. I know, but he's an idiot, not a villain. Minjun looked at me for a long moment. We will meet with Volkov. The meeting was in a warehouse near the docks. I insisted on coming. Minjun tried to stop me, but I refused to be a passive victim. Volkov was an older man, cold and calculating. He sat at a folding table, Obi tied up in the corner, looking terrified. Mr. Park, Volkov said, and the African Queen. Let my cousin go, I said, stepping forward. He owes us money, and you, my dear, are valuable leverage against Mr. Park. I am not leverage, I said, my voice steady despite my fear. And if you think threatening a single mother and a child makes you powerful, you are mistaken. Volkov laughed. She has spirit. She speaks for me, Minjun said, stepping beside me. Here are the terms. You release her cousin. You leave her and her daughter alone. In exchange, I give you the commercial rights to the strip mall in Uptown you've been wanting. Done, Volkov said, surprised. We walked out with Obi, who was crying and apologizing. Minjun had his men take Obi to a hospital. In the SUV, Minjun kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It was fueled by adrenaline and relief. I've wanted to do that since the wedding, he murmured. Me too. This isn't fake anymore, Amara. You know that. I know. We returned to the penthouse. That night, after Zuri was asleep, we sat on the terrace. I have a daughter, I said. This is dangerous. I will protect you. Both of you. Can I trust you? With your life. 2 weeks passed. We fell into a rhythm. I went back to work with subtle security detail. Then Kevin struck again. He cornered me in the hospital parking garage. I'm going to the police, Kevin spat. I know who he is. I'm going to sue for custody of Zuri. Unfit mother associating with criminals. You abandoned her. I screamed. Watch me. That won't be necessary. Minjun's voice cut through the air. He stepped out of the shadows, June beside him. This is harassment, Kevin said, his confidence wavering. No, Minjun said calmly. This is a reckoning. June handed Kevin a thick envelope. 5 years of unpaid child support. Interest included. A petition for full custody solely in Amara's name. And a restraining order. You can't do this. I have the best lawyers in Chicago, Minjun said. Walk away, Kevin. or I will bury you in so much litigation you will never see a paycheck again. Kevin looked at the envelope, then at me. He threw it on the ground and stormed off. Are you okay?
Mignon asked.
I think so. Let's go home. Home. The penthouse had become home. The following Saturday, Minjun hosted a dinner at Seoul Prime. He invited my whole family. My parents, Mia, even Tanya came alone, looking tired and humbled. The restaurant was closed for the private event. The table was set beautifully. Mara, my mother whispered. He is very capable. He is, Mama. Dinner was exquisite.
Mignon charmed everyone.
He treated Zuri like a princess, cutting her galbi for her.
At dessert, Mignon stood up.
3 weeks ago, he began, I asked a woman to pretend to be my wife. It was a ruse. But somewhere between the dance floor and tonight, the pretense faded. He walked over to me and knelt. The room went silent. Amara Adebayo, I offer you my heart, my protection, and my life. Will you marry me? For real this time? Tears streamed down my face. Yes. He slipped a ring on my finger. Zuri cheered. I have a job, Zuri announced, pulling 2 gold bands from her pocket. I'm the ring bearer. Everyone laughed. My father wiped a tear. Even Tanya smiled genuinely. Minjun pulled me into his arms. I love you, I whispered. I love you, he replied. My African queen. We danced on the terrace, surrounded by family, the Chicago skyline glittering behind us. The storm was over, and in the arms of a Korean mafia boss, I had finally found my peace.